Technology sector taking a beating. A steep sell-off in tech stocks yesterday pulled U.S. markets sharply lower, with the Dow closing down nearly 400 points. One day after the major indices posted their best day in more than 2 years. Technology stocks have come under pressure amid concerns over increased government scrutiny in the wake of privacy questions surrounding Facebook. All this coming amid speculation that the Trump administration is considering a crackdown on Chinese investments in U.S. technologies by using a law reserved for national emergencies. Joining us now to weigh in is the Director of Defense Studies at the Center for National Interest and the Executive Editor of National Interest Magazine, Harry Kazianis. Good to see you, Harry. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria.
So let's start first with the crackdown on Chinese investments in technology. We know that China has participated in 10% of venture deals in the U.S. in the last 5 years. Your take on what could happen in terms of China investing in U.S. companies?
Maria, I think there being some sort of restrictions is a very practical and an important step. I think if we look at the history of Chinese actions really over the last 10 years and things they've done to the United States, not just economic but geopolitical, there had to be some restrictions. You know, being in the defense sector and looking at this from that perspective, we look at some of the things the Chinese done in terms of stealing a lot of our defense intellectual property. They've hacked in and stolen our aircraft carrier designs, the V-22 Osprey, the F-35, which is a $1 trillion defense program. So when you look at it from that perspective, there has to be some restrictions. And then when we talk about the technology of the future, things like 5G, AI, if Chinese companies were to come in and essentially, buy parts of U.S. companies or get into joint ventures and then take that technology, we're essentially giving away our economic future to China. And I think that would be a big mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we have CFIUS, Mary, and that really does regulate whether or not we should see ownership of American companies. But at the same time, China has such strict situations with regard to American investing there, and we don't have anything like that.
No, I mean, look, our tariff barriers are very low compared to China, and China also has a lot of barriers that are not set in stone or formalized, right? They say, well, if you come here and you really want to get in, you have to give us 51% control, and we have to have a Communist Party member on your board in China, things like that. So Harry's absolutely right. There are a lot of problems here. Harry, my question to you is, what is strategic? I understand that, we don't want investment in dual-use technologies, defense, certain telecommunications industries, but where else does this go? Does it go to energy companies? I mean, what's the limit here?
I think the thing that I worry about most, Mary, is the technologies of the future. Like I was saying, 5G could be a revolutionary technology. I mean, most of us at home are getting, on our internet speeds about 100, 150 megs per second. That is the speeds of 5G over cellular networks. That could be revolutionary in terms of self-driving cars, medical devices. And in terms of, strategy and in overall geopolitics and intelligence, if the Chinese were to gain footholds in those arenas, the amount of intelligence they could gather would be astronomical. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm panicking over, what the Chinese can do in terms of intelligence capabilities, but I think we have some very real concerns when you combine that in terms of all of the geopolitical things the Chinese have done over 10 years. So I think it's good to be cautious. I think it's something that we have to do, but we have to remember the U.S.-China relationship is changing. Really, since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, this relationship was begging to be changed. I mean, one of the reasons why America and China actually came together in the first place is because of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was always going to be some sort of inevitable change, but it was always economics that brought us together.
Just now want to point out, Kevin, one thing that Devin Nunes told me on Sunday is not only are we dealing with these economic issues with China, but right now they're buying up a lot of infrastructure across the world. They're investing in these countries and then getting a sea line position and setting up military bases right there. This is another thing that this administration is watching real closely.
Especially in Africa,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
In Djibouti. And I think one of the important things to note is that China is going to get this 5G technology whether we like it or not, right? And one of the things this administration has done is block the Broadcom deal with Qualcomm. The issue actually has to do with, will we have that infrastructure, that technology? Are we going to have access to it in times of national defense? And I think that's the biggest question. If we don't have access to it, and only the Chinese do, if they're scooping up U.S. companies, that's the biggest issue. But I think one of the things we're tiptoeing around is North Korea. I mean, China is completely enabling North Korea and a lot of their weaponized attacks across the world, whether it's in South Korea, here. So the only way North Korea survives and thrives is through China. Now, do you think that's one of the biggest conflicts of interest that we're having right now with China and their technology? Harry?
I do, and I think that the point on North Korea is so key here. I mean, no wonder that Kim Jong-un is going to meet with Xi Jinping so early in terms of having multiple different summits and whatnot. And I think when we talk about issues on the Korean Peninsula and how this all comes to play, I think it's extremely important for the United States to continue making sure that we apply maximum pressure on both of those countries, because there's a relationship where essentially North Korea feeds off China, but China also feeds off North Korea. And I think as long as we're ensuring that pressure on both sides is being maintained, I think that's the smartest way to go. So I think all of these situations where we're talking about the recalibrating of the U.S.-China relationship, North Korea, it's all one big pot that we have to worry about.
We always talk about the big picture in terms of the U.S. and China's investment in technologies. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal that pinpoints how it does affect mama and daddy, if you will, in rural parts of America. And a lot of smaller telecom companies have relied on the gear made by Huawei. The bigger companies since 2012, because there's a fear, there was a congressional report done, there was a fear that China would exploit that technology being in the United States in order to spy or even hack into our data networks. But smaller telecom companies have relied on that very gear because it's cheaper. And there was the FCC put out a proposal on Monday that will likely restrict these smaller companies drawing on this $8.5 billion government-run fund to build out these rural networks. So again, there are broad implications for these rules that are sent out of Washington.
And the administration is watching each of these nuances.